guess we're doing take two again because Parker interrupted. He was very noisy. We'll see if he's still noisy. Okay, Chapter 7, Out of the Woods. Gray first light came while Rand still trudged through the forest. At first he did not really see. When he finally did, he stared at the fading darkness in surprise. No matter what his eyes told him, he could hardly believe he had spent all night trying to travel the distance from the farm to Emmons Field. Of course, the quarry road by day, rocks and all, was a far cry from the woods by night. On the other hand, it seemed like days since he had seen the black-cloaked rider on the road, weeks since he and Tam had gone in for their supper. He no longer felt the strip of cloth digging into his shoulders, but then he felt nothing in his shoulders except numbness, nor his feet for that matter. In between, though, it was another matter. His breath came in labored pants that had long since set his throat and lungs to burning, and hunger twisted his stomach into queasy sickness. Tam had fallen silent some time before. Rand was not sure how long it had been since the murmurs ceased, but he did not dare halt now to check on Tam. If he stopped, he would never be able to force himself to start out again. Anyway, whatever Tam's condition, he could do nothing beyond what he was doing. The only hope lay ahead in the village. He tried wearily to increase his pace, but his wooden legs continued their slow plod. He barely even noticed the cold or the wind. Vaguely he caught the smell of wood smoke. At least he was almost there if he could smell the village chimneys. A tired smile had only begun on his face, though, when it turned to a frown. Smoke lay heavy in the air. Too heavy. With the weather, a fire might well be blazing on every hearth in the village, but the smoke was still too strong. In his mind he saw again the Trollocs on the road, Trollocs coming from the east, from the direction of Emmons Field. He peered ahead, trying to make out the first houses, and ready to shout for help at the first sign of anyone, even Senbui or one of the Coplans. A small voice in the back of his head told him to hope someone there could still give help. Suddenly a house became visible through the last bare-branched trees, and it was all he could do to keep his feet moving. Hope turning to sharp despair, he staggered into the village. Holy fuck, I cannot talk. Charred piles of rubble stood in the places of half of the houses of Emmons Field. Soot-cooked brick chimneys thrust like dirty fingers from heaps of the blackened timbers. Thin wisps of smoke still rose from the ruins. Grimy-faced villagers, some yet in their night clothes, poked through the ashes, here pulling free a cookpot, there simply prodding forlornly at the wreckage with a stick. What little had been rescued from the flames dotted the streets. Tall mirrors and polished sideboards and high chests stood in the dust among the chairs and tables buried under bedding, cooking utensils, and meager piles of clothing and perhaps personal belongings. The destruction seemed scattered at random. Yes, Parker? You went outside? Okay. Give me a sec. Oh, no, you want attention. What? Come here. Okay. Say hi to Parker. Hi. Alright, let's see if we can read this with him in my lap. Where was I? Okay. Sorry. It took a second. The destruction seemed scattered at random through the village. 5 houses marched untouched in one row, while in another place a lone survivor stood surrounded by desolation. On the far side of the wine-spring water, the 3 huge red tine bonfires roared, tended by a cluster of men. Thick columns of black smoke bent northward with the wind, flecked by careless sparks. One of Master Elvir's Sturhan stallions was dragging something Rand could not make out over the ground towards the wooden bridge and the flames. Before he was well out of the trees, a sooty-faced Harald Luhan hurried toward him, clutching a woodsman's axe in one thick-fingered hand. The burly blacksmith's ash-smeared nightshirt hung to his boots, the angry welt of a burn across his chest showing through a ragged tear. He dropped to one knee before the litter. Tam's eyes were closed and his breathing came low and hard. "Trollocs, boy?" Master Luhan asked in a smoke-hoarse voice. Here too. Oh, he may have been luckier than anyone has a right to be if you can credit it. He needs the wisdom. Now where in the light is she? Egwene, running by with her arms full of bedsheets torn into bandages, looked around at them without slowing. Her eyes stared at something in the far distance. Dark circles made them appear even larger than they actually were. Then she saw Rand and stopped, drawing a shuddering breath. "Oh no, Rand. Not your father, is he? Come, I'll take you to Nynaeve." Rand was too tired, too stunned to speak. Even through the night, Emmons Field had been a haven, where he and Tam would be safe. Now all he could seem to do was stare at dismay in at her smoke-stained dress. Cannot fucking talk. He noticed odd details as if they were very important. The buttons down the back of her dress were done up crookedly, and her hands were clean. He wondered why her hands were clean, why her hands were clean when smudges of soot marked her cheeks. Master Luhan seemed to understand what had come over him. Laying his axe across the shafts, the blacksmith picked up the rear of the litter and gave it a gentle push, prodding him to follow Egwene. He stumbled after her as if walking in his sleep. Briefly he wondered how Master Luhan knew if the creatures were Trollocs, but it was a fleeting thought. If Tam recognized them, there was no reason why Harald Luhan could not. "All the stories are real," he muttered. "So it seems, lad," the blacksmith said. "So it seems." Rand only half heard. He was concentrating on following Egwene's slender shape. He had pulled himself together just enough to wish she would hurry, even though, in truth, she was keeping her pace to what the two men could manage with their burden. She led them halfway down the green toward the Calder house. Tar blackened the edges of its thatch, and smut stained its whitewashed walls. Of the houses on either side, only the foundation stones were left, and 2 piles of ash and burned timbers. One had been the house of Baron Thane, one of the miller's brothers. The other had been Abel Cauthen's, Mat's father. Even the chimneys had toppled. Excuse me. "Wait here," Egwene said, and gave them a look as if expecting an answer. When they only stood there, she muttered something under her breath and dashed inside. "Mat," Rand said, "is he—" "He's alive," the blacksmith said. He sat down. There's a lot of, "is he ... that, I don't really know how to make sound realistic, so sorry if I sound dumb. "He's alive," the blacksmith said. He set down his end of the litter and straightened slowly. "I saw him a little while ago. It's a wonder any of us are alive. The way they came after my house and the forge, you'd have thought I had gold and jewels in there." Albset cracked one skull with a frying pan. She took one look at the ashes of her house this morning and set out to hunting around with the village with the biggest hammer she could dig out of what was left of the forge, just in case any of them hid instead of running away. I could almost pity the thing if she finds one. He nodded towards the Calder house. Mr. Scalder and a few others took in some of those. Okay, he wants outside. Be right back. Okay, no distractions. Damn Raymond's in already. Mr. Scalder and a few others took in some of those who were hurt, the ones with no home in their own still standing. When the wisdom seen Tam, will find him a bed. The end, maybe. The mayor offered it already, but Nynaeve said the hurt folk would heal better if there weren't so many of them together. Rand sank to his knees. Shrugging out of the blanket harness, he wearily busied himself with checking Tam's covers. Tam never moved or made a sound even when Rand's wooden hands jostled him, but he was still breathing at least. "My father." That was just the other was just the fever talking. "What if they come back?" he said dully. "The wheel weaves, the wheel wills." Good fucking quote. Might get that as a tattoo. Master Luhan said uneasily. "If they come back, well, they're gone now. So we pick up the pieces, build what's been torn down," he sighed, his face going slack as he knuckled the small of his back. For the first time, Rand realized that the heavy-set man was as tired as he was himself, if not more so. The blacksmith looked at the village, shaking his head. "I don't suppose today will be much of a Beltane, but we'll make it through." Beltane's the festival they were going to have that was going to be the day that the Trollocs attacked, in case you don't remember. "But we'll make it through. We always have." Abruptly, he took up his axe and his face firmed. "There's work waiting for me. Don't you worry, lad. The wisdom will take good care of him, and the light will take care of us all. Light's God, if you haven't figured that out. And if the light doesn't, well, we'll just take care of him ourselves. Remember, we're Two Rivers folk." Still on his knees, Rand looked at the village as the blacksmith walked away. Really looked, for the first time. Master Luhan was right, he thought, and was surprised that he was not surprised by what he saw. Weird. People still dug the ruins of their homes, but even in the short time he had been there, more of them had begun to move with a sense of purpose. He could almost feel the growing determination. But he wondered. They had seen Trollocs. Had they seen the black-cloaked rider? Had they felt his hatred? Oh, fuck, that was the tattoo. Damn it. Nynaeve and Egwene appeared from the Calder house, and he sprang to his feet. Or rather, he tried to spring to his feet. It was more of a stumbling lurch that almost put him on his face in the dust. Been there. The wisdom dropped to her knees beside the litter without giving him so much as a glance. Her face and dress were even dirtier than Egwene's, and the same dark circles lined her eyes, though her hands, too, were clean. She felt Tam's face and thumbed his open eyelids. With a frown, she pulled down on the coverings and eased the bandage aside to look at the wound. Before Rand could see what lay underneath, she had replaced the wadded cloth. Sighing, she smoothed the blanket and cloak back up to Tam's neck with a gentle touch, as if tucking a child in for the night. "There's nothing I can do," she said. She had to put her hands on her knees to straighten up. "I'm sorry, Rand." For a moment he stood, not understanding, as she started back to the house. Then he scrambled after her and pulled her around to face him. "He's dying," he cried. "I know," she said simply, and he sagged with the matter-of-factness of it. "You have to do something. You have to. You're the wisdom." Pain twisted her face, but only for an instant. Then she was all hollow-eyed resolve again, her voice emotionless and firm. "Yes, I am. I know what I can do with my medicines, and I know when it's too late. Don't you think I would do something if I could? But I can't. I can't, Rand, and there are others who need me, people I can help." "I brought him to as quickly as I could," he mumbled. Even with the village in ruins, there had been the wisdom for hope. With that gone, he was empty. "I know you did," she said gently. She touched his cheek with her hand. "It isn't your fault. You did the best anyone could." "I'm sorry, Rand, but I have others to tend to. Our troubles are just beginning, I'm afraid." Vacantly he stared after her until the door of the house closed behind her. He could not make any thought come except that she would not help. Suddenly he was knocked back a step as Egwene cannoned into him, throwing her arms around him. Her hug was hard enough to bring a grunt from him any other time. Now he only looked silently at the door behind which his hopes had vanished. "I'm so sorry, Rand," she said against his chest. "Light, I wish there was something I could do." Numbly he put his arms around her. "I know, I have to do something, Egwene. I don't know what, but I can't just let him, His voice broke, and she hugged him harder. "Egwene!" At Nynaeve's shout from the house, Egwene jumped. "Egwene, I need you, and to wash your hands again." She pushed herself free from Rand's arms. "She needs my help, Rand." "Egwene!" He thought he heard a sob as she spun away from him. Then she was gone, and he was left alone beside the litter. For a moment he looked down at Tam, feeling nothing but hollow helplessness. Suddenly his face hardened. "The mayor will know what to do," he said, lifting the shafts once more. "The mayor will know." Bran al'Vere always knew what to do. With weary obstinacy he set out for the Wine Spring Inn. Another of the Duran, D-H-U-R-R-A-N, weird fucking word, Duran stallions passed him. Its harness straps tied around the ankles of a big shape draped with a dirty blanket. Arms covered with coarse hair dragged in the dirt behind the blanket, and one corner was pushed up to reveal a goat's horn. The Two Rivers was no place for stories to become horribly real. If Trollocs belonged anywhere, it was in the world outside. Parker wants back inside, not bring it back again. Jesus, this thing's already 13 and a half. He's very indecisive. And he wants in the lab again. Okay. I'm sorry. You're okay. Give me a sec. Sorry, he's sniffing the microphone. Okay, back to the book. Really, you find the most inconvenient spots. Okay. If Trollocs belonged to... Oh, How am I going to do this? You make this very difficult for me. I don't want to just hold the book over you. Are you okay? If Trollocs belonged anywhere, it was in the world outside, for places where they had Aes Sedai and false dragons, and light alone knew what else came to life out in the tales of Gleeman. Not in the Two Rivers, not Emond's Field. As he made his way down the... He is fucking adorable, isn't he? How am I gonna do this? You make this very difficult for me. Alright, well, I'm a little offset now. No, that doesn't help. Okay, I'm gonna be just a little bit in your left ear from now on, I guess. As he made his way down the green, people called to him, some from the ruins of their homes, asking if they could help. He heard them only as murmurs in the background, even when they walked alongside him for a distance when they spoke. Without really thinking about it, he managed words that said he needed no help, that everything was being taken care of. When they left him, with worried looks and sometimes a comment about sending Nynaeve to him, Nynaeve, not Nynaeve, he noticed that just as little. All he let himself be aware of was the purpose he had fixed in his head. Bran al'Vere could do something to help Tam. What that could be, he had not tried to dwell on, but the mayor would be able to do something, to think of something. The inn had almost completely escaped the destruction that had taken half the village. A few scorch marks marred its walls, but the red roof tiles glittered in the sunlight as brightly as ever. All that was left of the peddler's wagon, though, were blackened iron wheel rims leaning against the charred wagon box now on the ground. The background. Don't eat my shit. Ow. Fucker. What do you want? To ruin my recording, apparently. Here, do you need to way down? No, you just want to pedal. All that was left of the peddler's wagon, though, were blackened iron wheel rims leaning against the charred wagon box now on the ground. The big round hoops that had held up the canvas cover slanted crazily, each at a different angle. Thom Maryland sat cross-legged on the old foundation stones, carefully snipping singed edges from the patches on his cloak with a pair of small scissors. He set down cloak and scissors when Rand drew near. Without asking if Rand needed or wanted help, he hopped down and picked up the back of the litter. Inside, of course. Don't you worry, boy, your wisdom will take care of him. I've watched her work. Since last night, she has a deft touch and a sure skill. It could be a lot worse. Some died last night. Not many, perhaps, but any at all are too many for me. Old Fane just disappeared. I think that's the worst of it all. Trollocs will eat anything. You should thank the light your father's still here, and alive for the wisdom to heal. Rand blotted out the words. He is my father, reducing the voice to meaningless sound that he noticed no more than a fly's buzzing. He could not bear any more sympathy, any more attempts to boost his spirits. Not now, not until Bran al'Vere told him how to help Tam. Suddenly he found himself facing something scrawled on the inn door, a curving line scratched with a charred stick. A charcoal teardrop balanced on its point. So much had happened that it hardly surprised him to find the dragon's fang marked onto the door of the Winespring Inn. Why anyone would want to accuse the innkeeper or his family of evil, or even bring the inn bad luck was beyond him, but the night had convinced him of one thing. Anything was possible. Anything at all. He lets out again. So easy. Oh my god, this is 20 minutes long. Like halfway. Okay, we might chop this one in half. It's already been 20 minutes. I kind of want to keep them at that max. Didn't get as much done as the last time. Apologies about that. But we're going to I'll finish the paragraph, I guess. Where was I? Oh, I did. Anything was possible. Anything at all. Anything is possible. This story's awesome. It's going to keep picking up. Halfway through chapter 7.